Hey guys, real quick, want to give you guys a heads up. This video is gonna be particularly longer compared to say some of my other videos, just because I go through the history portion of this knife here a little bit. So if you want to skip that, go ahead and look in the link in the description. I'll have a timestamp on there so you can jump forward, as well as I'll put it on the video itself so you know where to go to. Otherwise, go ahead, stick around, and learn a little bit about this particular knife. So let's go ahead and let's get into the video. Hey guys, Roman here with Mission Forge, and today we're going to be working on another knife. And like normal, when I have a historic knife, I'll give you guys the background of the knife or the history behind it. For me, it just makes it a little bit more interesting, and it just really kind of helps you learn the history of how the knife became what it is, or something like that, if we know the origin, or what knives then evolved from certain knives and stuff like that. And so in today's knife, guys, is no different. We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it. And the knife that we're going to be working on or making is the Celtic Ring Handle knife, or sometimes called the Celtic Ring knife. Sometimes it's called the Gaelic ring knife, or the Gallic, from like the Gauls. And well, let's just go ahead and start talking about this knife. So this knife was very common during the Iron Age, right? So they found this knife over a period of a couple hundred years while in use. Now, there's nothing really spectacular about this knife compared to, say, a lot of other knives during this time frame, except that it had one real big defining feature, and that was the ring at the back of what would be like the pommel area of the knife. Now, the size and shape of this knife varied widely for the most part. So, some blades were just a few inches to include, or the knife just a few inches total, while it can be as big as like 14 inches. The blade's like 14 inches, almost like a short sword. So most of these knives were just single-edged, okay? They did find one that was like a double-edged dagger, but overall it was single-edged. And generally, the shape of the blade varied. Sometimes it would have like a slight swoop up, like this would be towards the point. It would have a swoop up. Other times, it would actually have a slight curve down. It would be flat back, and even sometimes the point would be just ever so slightly, just the point be pointed downward. The cutting edge itself would be, depending on the blade, have a nice swoop with a big heel, as well as sometimes be more of just a straight diagonal. So again, it just varied. Now the handle material, the handle itself, actually the whole knife was just one big piece of metal. To include the handle, it was a full tang. So you would have the handle piece that go through, and then the ring. Now, where you could see some differences in the handle is that sometimes the handle would be curved itself. It could be straight. Didn't matter. It'd be wide, a little thinner. Some of them even had look like a little bulge, like a bolster in the middle of the handle, and that was to help possibly grip it where it would feel more comfortable between the two fingers, to prevent it from sliding out. And then, of course, they all had the ring at the back of or the pommel area. Now, because the heel was so big, and then you had the ring, whatever, there was no need to really have a guard. So, that way the hand's not going to slide up onto the blade, the cutting edge. The handle material that they used, we're not really sure what they used. It's believed that it could have been leather, like it was wrapped in leather. It could be some kind of twine, even possibly wooden scales. But we know there wasn't bind with like inlaid with steel or gems, because we would have found those in dig sites, and archaeology would have. The knives were made during the Iron Age. Okay, so you would find them as within the between the 3rd and 5th BC, or something like that. I think is what they were saying. And of course past, even into right around the time like Roman Empire itself fell, not Constantinople necessarily, because that was during like the medieval era, but right around the time the Romans fell, these knives were being found, and that's because it was a Celtic based knife. So anytime wherever the Celts were, you would find these knives. Now, predominantly, this knife was found in what would be where the Gauls were at, in particular northern Gaul. So you would be like the north northern borders of France area and Belgium, as well into the North Sea. Um, but like I said, it was found in Ireland, in England, and Scotland, as well as even into Russia and the Scandinavians. So Norway, Denmark, um, and Sweden and Switzerland, all that stuff. So you were finding it everywhere because during the time frame where this knife was used, the biggest tribes out there and peoples was the Celtic tribes. In fact, they ruled over vast majority of the lands. That's why you would see Celtic symbols in the Viking era. You would also see it in Norway. You would find it in Russia and stuff like that. They were spread out everywhere. They ruled over Germanic tribes even at one point. So, but predominantly these knives were found where the Gauls were at. And it's not to say they weren't made in other areas. We're just not sure if they were. And the reason a lot of historians believe that it was predominantly, made in where the Gauls were in France areas, because that's where most of them were found. So it's believed that the knives that they found in other areas was most likely traded. And the reason is because in that particular area of where the Gauls were at, the craftsmanship and the workmanship and the weapon makers out there were really top notch for its time. So it was more likely traded. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't made other places. There's nothing original about knives. Every knife you can think of, it's already probably been made. And besides, what probably did happen is you probably had other tribes out there get one of these knives and then try to make it themselves or mimic it or then adjust it. Maybe they liked the design of the knife, but they need it smaller or bigger. Now, we don't know what the knives were used for necessarily. Some people look at the knife and they say, hey, this looks like this could have been used as a weapon. Or, hey, it could have been utilitarian, such as for, cutting things, butchering things, skinning, stuff like that. So they're not really sure. And the thing is that it could have just been a jack of all trades kind of knife. Because back in those days, the regular people had to defend their own villages and stuff. So if you can get like a one-size-fits-all kind of knife, that's what was used. The people who owned this knife were freemen, so they were not slaves or servants, because back in that time, especially in the Celtic era, the slaves would have been killed if they had any kind of knife, period, let alone one of these knives. And these knives, because they varied in size and stuff like that, generally meant, they could be used as a weapon or utilitarian. And if you had these knives, you were a person of importance. Not necessarily like a chief or a tribe leader or something like that, or rich or a ruler. It just meant you were free, you had say in what happens, and then you got to have this knife. Plus, to make a knife that was full tang, everything else like that was expensive, because steel was still, even though it's an Iron Age, was still hard to make and hard to get. So if you had that, you're probably well off if you had one of those. That nobody really knows for sure was, what was that ring for? Nobody really knows what the ring is for. It could be to hook it when they were done using it, so that way they could hang the knife, which makes sense. They could have made it so it was easier to pull from a sheath, because you have that bulge in the back with the ring is, it's easier to pull out. Some people believe that maybe even tied twine or some type of cordage to it, so if it dropped or fell, it's easier to retrieve. But one other thing that's probably more likely is that it made it so that your hand wouldn't slide off. And if I can find a knife to give you an example, I'll use this railroad spike knife here. So you see you got this piece here. Well, imagine this was a ring. What it does is it'll prevent your hand from sliding off the back of the knife. And because the front of the knife, the heel would be far out, your hand wouldn't slide forward, so not needing necessarily a guard to protect your hand. So one of the reasons they're not sure if it was used as a weapon or utilitarian was because it didn't have a guard. If it had a guard, and it's a very good sign that it was used as a weapon. So a utilitarian knife necessarily wouldn't have a guard. It's meant for cutting and stuff like that. That's what leads a lot of people to believe that was mostly utilitarian. What made a lot of people think, though, that it could be a fighting knife is because of how far the heel went down to prevent your hand from sliding up. Now, that could just mean from anything, though. So if you're, cutting meat, the handle gets bloodied, it wouldn't slide, onto the blade. So, now, let's go back to the knife. So, the one thing we're not really sure is what that ring was used for. So if they had that ring there, prevent yourself from your hand from sliding off or what, we're not really sure. The thing is that any of those and all of them could be correct. It's just we're not sure what the knife was, what that ring was necessary for. But like I stated though, the the Celtic ring knife, while nothing really spectacular, it was a very plain knife. There was none of them had any, from what I can find, fullers. They had no fullers in it. Single edged, most of them. The only thing that keeps them all within that family is the ring hilt. Now, or the ring pommel, excuse me. Now, but the thing about this knife, though, is that it's believed that several different knives evolved from the ringed knife. And some of them being what you would see in medieval France, a type of almost butcher knife was found that looked very similar to the old school or to the older ring knives. And so that's why some people believe that it was mostly meant for utilitarian. But we then look at other knives like the Bullock's dagger, which then eventually became the Scottish dirk, was more of a combative knife. And it had very similar blade features as that. So it really could have evolved into several different forms of knives. So with that, guys, hope you found this little history interesting. With that, let's go ahead and get to forging. Alright, guys, so here's what's going on. Making a Celtic ring handle, knife, and we're going to be using a piece of leaf spring here, so it's 5160, and we're going to go ahead and turn this into it. So I'm going to throw it in the forge and get it hot. Alright, let me see if I can get this bad boy straightened out a little bit. That was easy. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the point. So I'm going to flatten one side down, or not flatten, but bring it up to a point, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'll try to thin this out a little because that's pretty thick. There, that's going to be where the handle is really going to start. So then now I got to set it down more from there. Good news is handle's almost at length, and I still got to make it skinnier. I want to make it skinnier, make it longer, but this last little bit here, I got to keep a little bigger so I can punch a hole through. I'm going to be drifting the hole for the ring, and then we're going to expand that out a little bit, and then after that, may work on the handle a little more. I might put a curve in it, because I've seen a lot of examples where there was curves in the handle, and then work on the blade a tad more, but otherwise, we're going to be done forging out. I'll just go ahead and do the thermocycling process. Well, there you have it, guys. That's it for today's video. You just saw the forging process and all that fun jazz. If you found the video entertaining, helpful, and all that other fun jazz, go ahead and hit that like button. Also, got any comments or suggestions, leave down below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click that bell for more notifications. With that, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.